Show that is sweeping the nation here. Speaking of which, we'll talk about this now. The Fred Van Elite Fan Club is out there. I'll drop the link in chat. We're upping it to 25 people, so it will not run if it doesn't fill, but by request, people want to keep taking my money. So go for it. It's a buck at a time, and it is hilarious. So let's do that. Adam, how are you doing? We haven't done a video show in a while here.
Yeah, been a while. Doing pretty good. Looking forward to the 9-game slate. It's kind of the sweet spot for me, like 6 to 10 games, 6 to 8 games, I guess. But we haven't had that in a while. It's been like 11 gamers and then 3 and 4. So pretty excited about having like a medium-sized slate tonight.
A nice little down the middle 9-gamer. Reminder, let's get some of this fun stuff out here up front. We do have the Awesomeo Thrive synergy play here. Thrive is sponsoring our DFS strategy shows. So I'm going to drop that link in chat for you guys to join in. Now, the fun thing about that is it focuses on player props. So generally you have 20 to choose from. You pick 10 and your points calculate based upon the odds, if you will. So if you think something is likely to happen, they probably will too. You will get less points if you choose that side of things. If something's a little unlikely to happen, on the other side, you will get more points. So there we are. But I'm feeling really suave today. So let's continue on and just jump in here because that is what we do. I've got the projections loaded here, and I've run my initial crunches. Once we get the little Awesomeo player projections up, ownership projections up, I will add those in and we can take a peek. But in the meantime, let's start meandering, Adam, because we do have a 9-game slate. So first on tap here, we have Boston and Atlanta. Atlanta heading into Boston. Boston is 12.5-point favorites, and we know that Al Horford is going to be out. So that is going to open some things up there once again for Daniel Theis and also for Aaron Baines. Baines played, I want to say 15 or 16 minutes in his last outing, but should see a little bit more. He's been dinged up himself this season. And then the other news we're waiting on is Jaylen Brown. He has been dealing with the flu. If he is okay, then that's going to, diffuse some of the goodness. If he's out, we start to look at guys like Gordon Hayward, who's missed the last couple games because of illness. We look towards Tatum, and we can maybe look towards some of the guards. Let's assume that, because I believe Brown will be back, let's talk as if he was going to play. Break down the front court first here in this matchup against Atlanta with Baines and Theis, because I think those are going to be some of the early value plays that we look at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll have to keep an eye on Aaron Baines and see what kind of news we get on a minutes limit for him. He played 16 minutes in that game against the Wizards, and they had said before the game that he was going to be limited. But we'd seen him in previous starts this year when Al Horford was out, get up and push like, around 24, 25 minutes. And if he gets that against this Hawks team, it's almost impossible to see a way that he fails. So that's really, really important news I think we'll have to pay attention to. If we do assume that he's back to full strength and that we can get about 24 minutes out of him, he's obviously a really good play. If he's still limited, then what we saw against the Wizards was Daniel Theis once again getting in foul trouble. Played about 11 first half minutes, but then and only picked up one foul in his first 10 minutes, but then in the final stretch of the second quarter, he picked up 2 more, picked up his 4th and 5th in a minute and a half in the third quarter. So really was just in foul trouble the entire second half. I think that if Baines is still limited to that 16 to 18 minute range, you probably get Daniel Theis playing around 22 to 24 minutes, which isn't great, but it is the Hawks. So it would be at least mildly appealing, but I would really like Baines to just be good to go and be able to just play Baines.
All right. And that's, chat's chiming in with Theis having a couple duds lately and that we were late. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to fix all the settings we had from when I was traveling to this, but we should be good to go now. I see my videos not really cooperating, but hey, it is what it is when you're dealing with your old pal Emac. As long as you can hear us, I think that is the most important part. And yes, I do apologize for the delay because I too am a stickler for being on time because why have a schedule if you're not going to follow it? Okay, Adam. We do have the 24 days of giveaways, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But in the back of your mind, I want you to try to dust off some of those Christmas movies you've seen. I'm assuming you've seen one or two, so we're going to talk about that for a little bit of fun. Looking over here at the Boston front court, obviously it all starts with Kyrie Irving. Is he someone that you're willing to spend on this evening in a game that they should have handily? We know that he is always a phenomenal tournament option because he tends to, have that 50-55 fantasy point ceiling. But at 9,000, we kind of need to get that 50-55 point ceiling in order to justify this price point. And he has topped 50 points just twice in his last 6 games. So what are your thoughts on Irving?
Yeah, it's a spot where I'm definitely going to be paying attention to our projected ownership for tournaments. And, we talk a lot about not wanting to factor blowouts in and, it just being something that I don't really do. But still, there's, obvious risk here where if Kyrie does have a really good game, how is Atlanta keeping this game close? And then with it being a 9-game slate, there are plenty of options. So I love the spot for Kyrie, obviously. I think that he, even if I project him for 30 minutes to try and account for a blowout, I still get him as, a pretty good play. If he gets anywhere close to his 34 minutes, then he's great. But if we were to have him projected, hypothetically at 20 or 25%, then that's a spot where I would probably look to go underweight and pivot to some other guys. But if people are going to avoid him, as they tend to do in games with double-digit spreads, you get a lot of groupthink saying, that the game's not going to stay close. In that case, in tournaments, I would love to be overweight on him just because the ceiling is so high if the game does stay close and you can get him at lower ownership. So certainly a spot where I'm going to be paying pretty close attention to how we think the public's going to go on his ownership.
Okay, last guy I'm kind of interested in. If Brown is out with that illness, does that bring Tatum into play for you? Perhaps Smart, maybe Marcus Morris?
Yeah, so it keeps Marcus Smart in play. He's still on DraftKings. He's only $4,700. He was starting anyway, and playing 26 to 28 minutes. But if Brown's out, that should give him a couple more minutes. It's a matchup that I think is very appealing for Smart in that it's a game where obviously Boston's going to get more possessions because of the pace that Atlanta plays at. But it's also a bad rebounding Atlanta team. And it's also an Atlanta team that turns the ball over a lot. So, whenever you're in a spot where you're counting on Marcus Smart to make shots, it's not really a good position to be in. But when you're in a spot where he can pick up extra peripherals based on the team that he faces, I think this is a good matchup for him to, grab a couple extra rebounds, grab a couple extra steals, and, probably pay off that price tag pretty nicely at 4,700. So definitely have interest in him. As far as Hayward, he's 5,800 on DraftKings. I think that's pretty fair. So if I get some, that's fine, but it's not a spot that I'm super excited about going to.
All right, Adam, always twisting the words. If he gets some, it's fine, but he's not super excited about it. See, I don't make just dad jokes. There's a college humor for you. A very rated G, potentially PG college humor. Moving along here to the Atlanta Hawks, as chat is now cringing because we're on a slight delay, so they're getting that right about now. We have John Collins, who has been outstanding in his last few games. He's someone that if you're doing anything over there on the drafts in the 6 and 8 mans, he's someone that you can get as your forward to quite a bit, depending on the size of the slate. But he is probably the, quote, safest guy. We're seeing Dedmon. It's all going to depend on his minutes, what's going to happen here. But clearly a favorable matchup for him going against Baines. Kent Bazemore, bit of a tournament option here. He does have that 40 fantasy point upside with things somewhat thinning out without Taurean Prince here on the Hawks, with Jeremy Lin dealing with a sore back, etc. He could be counted on a little more. Still a tough matchup for these guys, even without Al Horford. The systematic defense there is going to be a challenge for them to move over on. But Atlanta's been a little frisky lately. Now that everybody's getting a little more minutes, things seem more solidified. How are you approaching this on a 9-gamer in knowing that we normally don't target Boston?
Yeah, I mean, I would stay away from it in cash games with, potentially the exception of Dedmon at 4,300 with power forward center eligibility on DraftKings. But it's obviously just a risky spot. Not only is Atlanta a 12.5-point underdog at Boston? But it's just it's a good Boston defense. It's a pace down game. It's an Atlanta team that, even though we have seen guys playing more minutes lately, they still have the bodies where if Lloyd Pierce wants to, he can completely screw up this rotation. And we've really seen him be prone to doing that in games where Atlanta gets out to a slow start. He'll kind of make mass substitutions, and this is easily a game where that could happen. So point just being that even though we're seeing minutes trend up for guys on Atlanta with Lynn out and with Prince out, there's still a lot of risk here as far as low floors on these guys. But there's also plenty of ceiling in tournaments because we have seen their minutes trending up. Dwayne Dedmon disappointed last game, but he still played 32 minutes and at a really cheap price tag. That's obviously appealing. You have John Collins. His price tag came down actually on DraftKings to 7,200. He played 36 minutes last game. He had kind of been locked into that 32-minute role, and he was producing very well there. But played even more minutes. If you're going to get around 36 minutes from John Collins here, it makes him a fantastic tournament play, especially if you're pairing him with someone like Kyrie and just trying to set it up for this game to stay close, and you get potentially low-owned, really high upside plays between those two guys. So I think that Collins and Dedmon would be my two favorite plays from the Atlanta side. Trae Young, obviously, it's Trae Young. I mean, he has plenty of upside at his price tag. He finally had a really good game his last time out. He said that he hit the rookie wall, then he had a good game. So who knows how his legs are feeling. It's a difficult matchup for him. All the opportunity is going to be there. That's really all that you can ask for. So another spot where I'll be, I guess, more aware of his projected ownership than for some other guys. But the front court's where I'm most interested with Collins and Dedmon.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move along here to our next game here. One comment on the rookie wall. A lot of times you'll hear him talking about it now because most teams are approaching 30 games here for the NBA season, and that's about what the average college season lasts. Additionally, with the college season, if you're not making the playoffs, etc., around 30 games is about where it goes. So this is the most these guys have played. Plus, the games are longer. It's stressor game. It's like, oh God, I'm in the show now. I'm playing in front of people dropping tons of coin every night. We're on TV, etc. So a lot of this is just general pressure, excitement, etc. Stuff wearing off. One thing to file away and keep in mind is as we hit some of these, the All-Star break, which is going to be very nice, you're going to see a lot of these guys rejuvenate, especially the guys that don't go to any of the competitions or festivities, because they tend to all of a sudden have nearly a whole week off, and it does wonders. Because if you think about it, these guys are basically playing every other day at this point in the season. They play about 3.5 games a week, so some weeks obviously a little more, some weeks a little less, but then you remember they're traveling, and they're not traveling just up and down the East Coast. I mean, a lot of these flights are long, and they have their West Coast swings, and a lot of times when the East Coast teams and the West Coast teams do their opposite coast swings, it's up to between a 5 and a 7 game road trip. So that is also pretty draining as well. So food for thought, something to keep in mind, but those are the things you see when you hear people talking about the rookie wall. Adam, our next game here, we have New York and Charlotte. Tasty matchup here for one Kemba Walker. Not so tasty price on DraftKings at 9,200. Another guy who should have a nice raw points game. On the other side, some intriguing plays here. And Kevin Knox, 4,800. What the hell's going on? But yet he's popping in the models and the projections. He's averaged 40 fantasy points over his last 2 games. A 50 burger against, oh wait for it, Charlotte. Yeah, tonight's matchup. But that was at home. And then he dropped 30 in his first start in nearly 2 weeks, or nearly almost a month, again in Cleveland. So talk to me about Kevin Knox here, and what is going to happen to take him off the court from his coach? Would it be, does the coach see a bird fly by him on the way to the stadium today? Is it something as sophisticated as that to ruin our hopes and dreams of Kevin Knox?
Yeah, I mean, who knows with the Knicks? Obviously, it's Atlanta version 2.0. We can say with as much confidence as we want what the Knicks are probably going to do, and then Fizdale's going to go do whatever the hell he wants on a whim. But Kevin Knox, you mentioned obviously joining the starting lineup here, and while that's not necessarily something that bodes well for his usage, playing more minutes alongside Tim Hardaway and Enes Kanter obviously will take some looks away from him that he'd be getting with the second unit. But he's just playing monster minutes here, and the price tag's too low. Last game he played 32 minutes, and if you actually go back and look at Popcorn Machine, He lost like 6 minutes to foul trouble in the first half. He picked up 2 fouls in his first 11 minutes. He subbed back in at the 7:22 mark of the second quarter, picked up his third foul 28 seconds later, missed the last almost 7 minutes of that quarter, still played 32.7 minutes. Even if you take a couple minutes away, saying that, maybe he came back earlier in the fourth quarter than he would have had he not missed the second quarter, whatever. I think around 36 minutes for Kevin Knox is a very, very reasonable projection here, assuming that we get a rotation anywhere close to what we've been seeing from the Knicks the last couple of games. So I think that Knox really stands out as just a top value play here, simply because of how many minutes he's going to play. And, it's not a terrible matchup against Charlotte. So Knox pretty easily my favorite play from the Knicks side. You can certainly look to Tim Hardaway, who's been the only guy on the Knicks who really consistently has played like 36 minutes a night this season. Enes Kanter finally got some fourth quarter run. Last time out, he got up to, I believe, 32 and a half minutes. It was the first time in, I think, 5 games that we had seen him play in the fourth quarter. He had missed due to blowouts. He had missed due to a matchup against Giannis. He had been taken off the floor in a matchup against Markieff Morris. So the minutes have really been volatile, but he's certainly someone that when he gets 32 minutes, he's a pretty strong play. It is a nice matchup against this Cody Zeller-led front court. I expect Kanter to be able to rebound pretty much at will here. So purely a tournament play. Don't look to him in cash games because the minutes are so volatile. But I do think that there's plenty of upside for him. And I would say that him and Hardaway are pretty close, like neck and neck for my second favorite option here behind Kevin Knox. Ntilikina being back in the rotation takes some appeal away from Mudiay. He got back to about 30 minutes last game, but we're still seeing Ntilikina, pick up 20 plus minutes off the bench, essentially backing up Mudiay. So it's tougher to project Mudiay for that 34 to 36 minute role that he briefly had. And the price tag has come up a little bit. So, plenty of risk there at 5,700 if you're only going to get about 30 minutes from him.
All right. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up is what to do with Mudiay. Just when you think you're safe to go back in the water. Nope, it's not. It is the Knicks. Looking to the other side here, we do have Charlotte, who put a whooping on these guys in their last meeting, generally led most of the game by close to 20 points. So we've got Kemba, that is the driving force and is having an outstanding season for Charlotte. He is going to be a little expensive here. We just got the ownership projection, so I'm going to load those into Cruncher and see where they compare it, and I'll have a number here, at least with our first pass for Kemba Walker on the Awesomeo proprietary ownership projections. But I guess kind of the short list here, Walker, Lamb, maybe a Marvin Williams, a little bit off the board, but 4,900 for Williams. I'd rather have him, 10, 15% cheaper would make me a little more excited for this one. What are your thoughts here for the Charlotte Hornets? And I see that Nicholas Batum is really popping in our projections on FanDuel, so I'm going to investigate that a little bit. What do you got here for the Kings of Queen City?
So Kemba, obviously it's a nice spot for him. Price tag came up a bit after the 60 burger he dropped on the Pistons his last time out. So it's a tournament spot. There's nothing to dislike here for Kemba. I don't think he's going to end up being like an optimal cash play, at least on DraftKings. Like FanDuel, obviously it ends up being a little bit different because of being able to drop a player. And sometimes you just kind of end up on like a quote unquote last guy in, but a guy that you really like, but it's just a completely different roster construction there. But at 9,200 on DraftKings, I think it's purely a tournament option, but there's a ton of upside there. If I project him for 36 minutes with the rates that he's been playing at over the last month or so, I get like a 52-point DraftKings projection. And obviously, if this game is really tight down the stretch, you probably get a couple more minutes from Kemba, really. So there's more than enough upside here for Kemba. Puts him right in that same category as Kyrie Irving. One guy that actually stands out, though, and we've seen the minutes be volatile all season long, but Jeremy Lamb played about 36 minutes last game, and there's a bunch of different ways that he can lose those minutes. We've seen Charlotte be a team that kind of on a game-to-game basis really changes their rotation, especially amongst the wings. So you could see Malik Monk take more minutes. You could see Tony Parker take some minutes from him. But just the fact that you have the potential for 34 to 36 minutes from Jeremy Lamb in a really appealing spot, at a mid 5K price tag makes him a pretty appealing tournament option for me.
All right. It just looks like it's a little bit of a high projection for Nick Batum, running him out on FanDuel here at 26, which to me seems a little bit high because he hasn't topped 20 fantasy points in the last few games, but it is a matchup against the Knicks. He is still getting the minutes, which of course is key. He has just not been producing nearly as much as we would like to see this season. At first blush, I'm guessing this is someone that I would tamp down just a little bit in the projections. And the funny thing is if I drop him just a couple points down to 22, he doesn't pop in the projections. So when you're utilizing this mass multi-entry, particularly with the Fantasy Cruncher add-on or any other optimizers that you're looking at,
you 26.5 DraftKings.
Pardon? What was that? How many points do you have him for?
Oh, sorry. I've been projected for 32 minutes, 26.5 fantasy points. Sorry if I cut you off. I couldn't hear anything you were saying.
Oh, well, hey, it's me and it's you. Technical wizardry at its finest. So I was just saying that is someone that you want to be a little bit, a situation you want to just look into a little bit. Because if you drop him down to like 23, 24 fantasy points on Yahoo, all of a sudden he falls out of the projection. So he's right on that cusp there of the it looks like about 5.5 is the magic number to keep him in or out of projections, and I'm running a 25% randomizer on that. So just food for thought there. Again, we do know that when he's in there, Batum can be a difference maker. It would not be a complete shock if he had 35 fantasy points or better on either site tonight, but not someone that you're going to enter in your content or put in your rosters lightly on a 9-game slate. If this was a 5-game or a 4-gamer, he'd be much more in the conversation for me. At this point, I suspect I would be more interested in potentially matching the field, which on FanDuel looks like it's about 14%. So that's a little more favorable because you figure, 1 in 10 games, he's going to have a really nice one.
Yeah, I mean, he's a perfect example of a guy who I think is he's too cheap for the minutes he plays, but he really just hasn't done anything this year. So if I get Batum in lineups, that's fine. Over the last month, the 13% usage rate, 14.5% assist percentage, 8.8% rebounding percentage, averaging 24.5 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So, I mean, it's the price tag is cheap because we know like what Nick Batum's capable of doing. But if you just kind of put the name out of your head and just look at, what he's done this season, it's really not that much of it's not really underpriced. It's pretty correctly priced, I think.
All right. For those of you that are not yet behind the Awesomeo paywall, what are you waiting for? And here's a chance. 7 days free if you use the promo code DFS strategy. If you go to the join tab on the Awesomeo.com homepage, you can select a package. If you choose one that has the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, you will get that as well. You enter your information, and then it'll say, I think it says coupon code, and you will put in DFS strategy, all one word, and that will get you 7 free days. Now, what you want to do when you do that is, if you only want to try it for the 7 days, you can go in once it's done its little magic and given you access, you can cancel your subscription, and it'll hold that. What that will do is it will keep the recurring charge from coming on, and you just try it out for 7 days. I guarantee you're going to want to stick around a little bit longer. Plus, you get access to Slack and special guest this week, international troll Seth Hader is back in the premium Slack. So it's like my prayers have been answered, Adam, or is that nightmares? Sometimes I get those confused. All right.
Yeah, definitely a nightmare with Seth.
Yeah, there you go, Seth. Food for thought. Anything else from this game, or shall we continue on as we get to some more juicy matchups?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's all that I'm really looking at from this one right now.
All right, the Bucks, Cleveland. We have Milwaukee as double-digit road favorites, checking in as 10-point favorites here. We have a 218 over/under. This one is in Cleveland. Cleveland is a little bit of a mess. Giannis, did I really just do that? Giannis Antetokounmpo. Expensive, Adam. 11,000 on DraftKings. We're going to need him to approach 60 fantasy points, upper 50s, to make that a palatable price point. He's been he got 2 games ago, and the last time these two teams faced off, he did not play. In his last game, it was nice to see him back to 31 minutes in a loss to Indiana in Indianapolis. The minutes are a little concerning. Adam. The slight injury he's been dealing with, a little bit concerning. What are you going to do with him? Because he's not really on my short list today, because I feel that they will have this game in hand very nicely, the day being Milwaukee. And this feels more like a luxury play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk anyone off of Giannis. Obviously, he has the potential to be the highest scorer on the slate. But when you look at other spots on the slate, I think that he's not. Yeah, you put it correctly. He's like a luxury to me. It's a 9-game slate with a very, very deep mid range and or upper mid range in that like 8 to 10K range. Not even to mention guys like Embiid and Westbrook that are over 10K with Giannis. So if I get there, I get there. But I just feel like going all the way up to him probably costs me some upside. Whereas I could reallocate that money and get a couple of guys in that like Kemba Walker range.
Right.
So yeah, so I think it's probably also a different play between DraftKings and FanDuel. Again, like I mentioned with Kemba, being able to drop the player on FanDuel and also being forced to roster 2 small forwards makes it a little bit different. And in general, I've been getting Giannis more lately on FanDuel. But yeah, it's just the most expensive player on the slate in a huge pace down game against Cleveland. Yes, it's a bad Cleveland defense, but you still need a lot to go right for Giannis to really be worth it in the context of this slate.
All right, secondary plays on this team. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because Bledsoe at 7,600. We know he can flirt with 40 fantasy points. Same thing can be said for Middleton at 6,400. Those are the guys I want to give my consideration to. Malcolm Brogdon, I mean, potential for mop-up duty here. He's still, obviously, he's been starting all season. He has a bit of a different role than he did previously. He's been being counted on kind of as their third scorer, I guess. It gets tough, because is it going to be Bledsoe, is it going to be Middleton, or is it going to be Brogdon that ends up being the second or third option on the night? And then whichever one's not hot, just as it looks like they've been content to just like, all right, you guys have it tonight, which is frustrating for daily fantasy sports, because you need guys that are going to get theirs. And that's the one thing that makes me nervous, because I think all 3 of these guys are appropriately priced in the mid-7, mid-6, and upper 5s here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. Sorry, it broke up, so I thought you were done. Chris Middleton's the one that I think is actually really interesting here, and he's obviously been playing awful, but the minutes have been there, and we know what Chris Middleton's capable of doing. But the price tag's just come down because he's been playing so poorly. Like, if you look at the DraftKings pricing, Eric Bledsoe is $1,200 more expensive than Chris Middleton, playing very similar minutes. That's just not something that you would expect to be correct over the course of the season. So even though Middleton's been playing really poorly, it's affected his price tag. It affects his ownership. We see the ownership lower than we normally would. It's a spot where I feel pretty good about just rostering Chris Middleton until he gets things back together. It obviously is a bad Cleveland defense. The pace down game isn't great, but again, the price is cheap enough that I think it's a pretty appealing spot. So out of those secondary options, that's where I would like to have probably my most exposure, just because I think he's the most underpriced out of that group.
All right, let's look at Cleveland here, because we have a bit of a change. We've got, let me move my mic a little closer here and try to talk with a little more authority. Adam, apparently I'm tuckered out today, I guess. Well, I had 3 beers with dinner last night, went out and saw some friends. That's a rarity for me. So perhaps I didn't get all of the REM sleep that I generally get, because
it wasn't you. It's my connection's just choppy.
Oh, there we are. Well, once again, it's either you or me, because it's the 2 most jinxed technophobes, Luddites, if you will, on Awesomeo. Larry Nance is where we're starting here. We know that Tristan Thompson is going to be out for the next probably 3 or 4 weeks. Nance ceded his starting spot to Channing Frye, which I'm fine with, because Nance, still going to get the minutes. Anything that gets him going against some of these secondary units is going to be good, because he is going to gather up all of the rebounds that he can. He was only 1 for 5 in his last game, Adam, and still scored 43 FanDuel points here. 11 rebounds, 7 assists, which was nice, and then 3 blocks, 3 steals. So he was loading up on the hustle helper stats, even though he was not scoring. I still like him to approach 40 fantasy points, but at a $7,000 price tag on FanDuel, and then over here on DraftKings, he is checking in at 6,200. I'm leaning more towards him being a DraftKings play for me. What are your thoughts, beginning with Nance here?
Yeah, I mean, more appealing on DraftKings for sure at that price. Still kind of steep. I mean, it depends what we see. Like he played 33 minutes last game, and that puts him as pretty correctly priced for me. If he were to get up to like 36 minutes, I think that would make a pretty big difference. But I talked about it before the last game when I did the show with Lofty. Tristan Thompson being out is just a huge deal for Larry Nance because even though we had some games when Cleveland was banged up where we were seeing Nance still play 34 to 36 minutes and he was really disappointing, he's just completely different when he's playing center compared to playing alongside Tristan Thompson. He's averaged about 1.1 fantasy points per minute when he's playing without Tristan Thompson on the floor, compared to about 0.85 fantasy points per minute alongside Thompson. And the reasoning is just the type of player that Larry Nance is. He's not a high usage guy that's going to go out there and create his own shot and knock down threes and do any of that stuff. Most of his offense comes at the rim and comes on offensive rebounds and getting putbacks. And when Tristan Thompson's out there, that's not happening for him. You see his rebounding percentage go down several percentage points when he's playing alongside Thompson. You see his assist percentage go down just as a result of not having the ball in his hands. You see the usage rate go down as a result of just not being at the rim as often. So it really takes a lot out of him when he's not playing or when he is playing alongside Thompson. So I do expect, more productive minutes now that Thompson's out. It's just a matter of his price tag very quickly rose, and how many minutes do we get? Because how does this rotation work exactly? Like, Channing Frye, obviously he started the last game, may or may not start tonight, but they also have Ante Zizic who could steal minutes from him at the 5. The thing that just kind of scares me is that for whatever reason, the Cavs have really been hesitant to play Larry Nance as much as they can, like unless they're absolutely forced into it. Like they're forced to give him a bunch of minutes now, but it's still like they're not completely letting him go and just turning him loose like for 36 or 38 minutes. So that's somewhat concerning to me, but still, 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy playing 33 to 34 minutes certainly has a place in lineups.
All right, as I ran the crunch, capped at 70%, 25% random. Again, you can get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on with any Awesomeo.com package. It is an add-on, which means it will run you a little bit more, but a very fair deal. So I'm looking at this. No Nance at all on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I've got him at 14%. Currently, we have the field at 4%, which feels somewhat appropriate here. As you mentioned, Adam, a lot of it's going to depend on the rotation and the starting lineup. So that might be someone that you flag. I like to have a little notepad here because, one, I'm old school, and two, it reminds me of all the little things that I need to do right before lock as I'm building out my player pools. I like playing 100 lineups now. So I might make a little note just to remind myself for Nance that, hey, double check where he is against the field, and if he's starting, probably back off him just a little bit for me, and depending on the status of Zizic. So there we are. Looking at some of our other guys, we have, I don't know that a crowded backcourt is what we want to say, but we do have Burks, we have Clarkson, we have Sexton, Rodney Hood's in the mix. They've reacquired Matthew Dellavedova. This kind of makes things a bit messy. Burks was doing quite nicely when he joined the team. He was getting double-digit shots in every game. The last 4 it's trended down, and you can tell me which 2 you think Dellavedova joined the team. 14, 11, 8, 6 field goal attempts. So I think Burks is off the table for me. Do you want any of these guys on a 9-game slate?
I'm still interested in Burks at 4,500, and the reason is just that we know how productive he can be on a permanent basis, and the game logs aren't great, so people will shy away from it. It's still a pace-up spot, or it's a huge pace-up spot here against Milwaukee. Burks is someone that we could see get garbage run too if this game were to blow out. I think there's just a lot of ways for Burks to get his minutes. He played 26 minutes against the Knicks, but if you look at the rotation, it was just, the rotation was all over the place. You got 34 minutes from Jordan Clarkson. Dellavedova, played about 22 minutes. There's a lot of room for Alec Burks to pick up a few extra minutes. He only played 3 minutes and 19 seconds in the fourth quarter. He left the second quarter with 3 minutes and 51 seconds to go before the half. Like, there's a bunch of spots where slight adjustments to the rotation give him a few more minutes and he gets up to 30. So, not something, again, that I'm looking at in cash games, but assuming he's going to come in at low ownership in tournaments because of concerns around him. Like, if you get 30 minutes from him at 4,500 in this spot, I think he ends up being a really strong value play. So I do have quite a bit of interest in Alec Burks, Colin Sexton as well. The minutes down a little bit. He's the one that's most affected, I think, by Dellavedova in terms of minutes, because you've seen Dellavedova essentially just play backup point guard and not play a whole lot alongside Sexton. So instead of getting those 38-minute games that we were getting, it's more likely we get Sexton back down in like that. He played 28 last game, down into like that 32, 33-minute range. But he does have, over the last month, without Thompson on the floor, a 28.5% usage rate. In general, we've seen the usage up lately. So I would put him behind Nance. I would put him behind Burks. But I do have some interest there.
Okay. And looking at our early projection run here on FanDuel, getting 28% of Sexton, and the field we have at 5%. So that would be one where you say, all right, I want to come in stronger than the field. Perhaps I move that down to 15% if I'm going against 5% and I have a strong feel about something and I'm playing a lot of lineups. That's how we use the leveraging aspect of things. Over here on DraftKings, Burks is actually popping into 14% of my lineups. I feel all right with that. It's about where the field is. We've got the field at 8, so that's a fun one. Sexton popped a little higher than I thought. He was 19 on DraftKings, and the popularity is 8. So if you feel strongly about him, doubling up on the field, totally fine right there, especially when it's at these smaller percentages. All of a sudden, if the field is 40 and you want to go 80, probably not the way to do it, especially with basketball. Looking at the rest of this, I'm not seeing a ton of intriguing stuff here. Adam, just double checking the updated news, and we don't have anything on that. Shall we continue on to oh, go ahead.
Well, I just kind of forgot to mention Jordan Clarkson. Like I mentioned, he played 34 minutes last game, but it does make him an interesting tournament option. We've seen the minutes just absolutely all over the place for him. He played really well against the Knicks. He got 34 minutes. And just knowing that he potentially can get there at 5,300, this is a guy with a 30% usage rate when he's on the floor. It makes it a spot where he certainly has upside. You just have to know that there's a ton of risk there too, because if Burks is playing well, or if Clarkson's not playing well, or if a variety of other things happen, you could very easily end up with like a 24-minute game instead of a 32 or 34.
All right, I see Benjamin Cisco chiming in. Not a fan of usage. Now, usage is something that it's not the end-all, be-all, but what it does is it describes how each the percentage of plays end with a player on the court. So if they shoot, if they get a turnover, etc. So it just lets you know that they're the one that finishes off a possession. That's, I think, the easiest way to explain it, and it just shows their level of involvement. So. As we mentioned, you get somebody down there in the 9 to 14%, not going to see a lot of stuff going on with them. They're probably only shooting, or it's Raul Neto, who is a pass-only guy and plays 12 minutes a game when he's healthy. What do you look for usage, or how would you, if you were describing usage, Adam, to someone that's new to following along with daily fantasy sports? What would be your 15 to 20-second explanation of it?
I mean, as far as its use for, I mean, you explained what it is, but as far as its use for daily fantasy sports, it's just the easiest way to input, how involved in an offense someone is as far as shooting. It doesn't measure assists. That's a completely different rate that you have to pay attention to. But, as far as usage goes, it accounts for shots, it accounts for turnovers. So, like you said, it covers possession, the percentage of possessions that end with the ball in a player's hands. But it's the easiest way to gauge, how many shots someone's getting up, and what it helps you, measure their upside. It helps you basically project how many points they're going to score. I mean, it's, from a projection standpoint, it's easily like probably the most important stat that we have.
Let's move along here to Indiana and Philadelphia. We have the Sixers favored by 5. We have a 219 over under here. Couple news and notes here from the Sixers side. We do have Mike Muscala dealing with an illness, and we have Jimmy Butler, who missed the last game with the groin injury. Both are listed as questionable. On the other side for Indiana, Victor Oladipo was back, played, if memory serves, about 29 minutes in his first appearance after missing the better part of 3 weeks with the sore knee. So I don't know that he will have a minute cap, but I think I would be shocked to see him go over anything in the maybe 32 to 34 range for Oladipo, because it's a long season and they're going to need him healthy. If they do anything, we'll get to Butler in a second. What are your thoughts on Oladipo?
Really tough, I think, to go there. I mean, in his second game back, and on a 9-game slate. He's priced down to 8,400, so it's not a terrible price tag, but still just think there are a lot of other spots that I can probably get to.
All right. Flipping it over to Butler, dealing with that groin injury. 50-50. I'm leaning to him not playing, but we haven't had word from shoot around. We don't know how the treatment's going, etc. What's your initial lean of whether he plays or not? Because that's going to dramatically impact what we do with Embiid and with Ben Simmons.
Yeah, obviously some of the more important news on the slate. Without any updates as of yet, I'm assuming that he does not play. Just because why would they push it? So yeah, I mean, I haven't projected out right now, which obviously makes a big difference for Simmons and Embiid.
All right, so let's operate as if we do think he is going to be out. I'm just looking to see. The last news we had was last night. Day to day after an MRI, no long-term structural damage. They are not going to rush him back. We should know more on Friday. That is courtesy of RotoWorld and NBA.com. So we should have news with this being one of the earlier games here. Philly generally does a good job of this, though not always, because, hey, it is the NBA. So let's just assume he's out. Embiid, Simmons going against Indiana. Indiana's been getting a little bit better on defense as the season progresses. What are your thoughts on Philly? And we'll start there, and then we'll get the Furk on in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, if Butler's out, then even though Embiid is expensive, it's still really difficult not to have him as, one of the top plays on the slate, just because of how many minutes he plays and how involved he is without Butler. Not to mention his role in the offense changes, as he's talked about, and he's just more productive as a scorer when he's closer to the basket and he's getting more opportunities in the paint. So if Butler's out, I still love Embiid here. Played 38 minutes last game. Even if you project him for 36, he comes in as one of the top scorers on the slate. So really like him, it is a pace down spot. It is a good Indiana defense, but it's still Joel Embiid getting a ton of work in a ton of minutes. So really, really tough not to like him. Ben Simmons, I'm less interested in Simmons here than I was against the Nets in their last game, just because it is a better Indiana defense. It is a really, really slow-paced Indiana team, and Simmons obviously needs peripherals to really, hit a ceiling. He's a guy that very frequently is going to come in that like 45 to 48 fantasy point range. That is nice at his price, but it doesn't really do anything to actually help you win a tournament. So I think Embiid's the one that's more likely to produce a score that you have to have in your lineup to win a tournament.
All right, and then what would you play them both on the same team? Because I want to talk about how we can do that with Fantasy Cruncher.
I'm not opposed to it. I doubt that I would end up with a lot of it just because I'm not that high on Simmons.
All right, so one way you can do that on Fantasy Cruncher is creating groups. It's in the advanced setting tab. So what you can do is you can create a new group. You can add both Simmons and Embiid to that, and you can set the limit to saying play no more than one of these guys. And that's something I will do in this situation. A lot of times your projections should kind of take care of it. You can just disable any of the rules if you wanted to say, oh, I'm going to set up a bit of a game stack, and I think those two guys are going to be in there, and Sabonis will probably have a good one if they're doing well, etc. And you can start to play around with it that way. But for something like this, I think I would go an either or on this one. And I tweak there. What do you have Embiid and Simmons projected at points-wise? Assuming that Butler is out. Tournament projection.
I'm updating my Embiid right now, but I have Embiid at 62 DraftKings points if Butler's out.
All right, so I ran them at 60 and 50, respectively there. And by doing that, they're going to pop in both your projections. So you may not want both of them on the same team because or the same entry because you're saying, well, what are the odds that they both do well? Well, we've seen them do well together frequently. But have we seen them have tournament-type scores together? Well, they kind of did in their last game, but that is no guarantee. So while they generally don't cut into each other, it all comes down to who's going to get the scoring as the differentiation play. So that's usually why those two guys I don't like to have on the same team. Moving on to if Butler is out, and both you and I suspect he will be, what are you going to do with Furkan Korkmaz? He has back-to-back 30 fantasy point games, got the start in the last game, running with 20 and 19% usage. That's good to see. Running with 35 minutes in the last game, 25 or 26 in the one before that. Been nailing his shots. He was 8 of 14 in the last game, 7 of 12 prior to that. That is probably not sustainable for a guy that's closer to a 43% type shooter, but it is nice to see that he has been involved, and he gets some steals as well, which is also good to see. What are you going to do with Korkmaz now that his price is elevating?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a decent price tag. Like, he's 3,800 on DraftKings. He played 34 minutes last game. But one thing to keep in mind, for one, Mike Muscala was out that game. That opened up more potential minutes. But also, like you said, he was shooting really, really well. So you saw Landry Shamet play 20 minutes. You saw Korkmaz get 34. What happens if Korkmaz isn't making every shot that he takes, and Landry Shamet gets hot? Like, the point is just that just because he played 34 minutes last game doesn't make him a lock to do it again here, even if Butler's out. I still think that there's plenty of upside at the price point. He's clearly a cash game play, assuming Butler's out, and he's going to be really popular and everything. But in tournaments, it's just still, I'm not convinced that he's a guy that is very frequently going to go for like 30-plus fantasy points. So I'm not opposed to rostering him. It's just that if he comes in at like 30 or 35% ownership, I'll probably end up under the field.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So when I ran the updated just placeholder projections for Embiid and Simmons on DraftKings, it's not as bad. I'm getting them at 35% each, running this uncapped with Embiid at 60 and Simmons at 50. Over on FanDuel, I'm getting them at 70% a piece. Now, some of that is a function of the positionless basketball over there on DraftKings, which brings in more players into the option, because Simmons is only point guard, and if you're going to have him projected as nearly the highest let's say projected as the highest scoring point guard, he's going against Russell Wilson, probably Kemba, maybe John Wall in tournaments. So there's a few options there. Embiid, he's the highest raw points guy at center. There's not many other people that are going to break into that unless you do some manipulating of your optimizer. So that's just one important thing that I want to mention, because a lot of people are really getting into the optimizers. We talk about it a lot, but you can't just push the button, ready, set, go. I mean, once you start working on your player pool, trying to find your exposures, when you hear people talking about finding their exposures, it also means what they're doing with their player mix on certain lineups. So you might say, hey, I want to pick me, if I play this guy, I want at least, one of these other three guys from the other team to, quote, run it back and things like that. So those are the different things you want to set up. Probably once I start with my player pool, it's a good 60 to 90 minutes before I'm done and ready to upload. Adam, from your perspective, generally, how long does it take you to set up your player pool, get it right, and get the mix that you're looking for? Because you run a fair number of lineups, but then you parse them out into 3-max and single entry tournaments.
Yeah, it kind of depends how much time I leave myself. Normally, I just run out of time after the deeper dive show. But
nothing but the truth here on the NBA DFS strategy show.
But yeah, no, I mean, it takes a while. I've been talking about it in Slack a bit, but I've been working a lot lately on kind of just automating my process more to try and save time, doing more stuff in Excel, less stuff by hand. But it takes a while.
All right, so just want people to know, it's not a magic pushing of the button. People that are doing this in the mass multi-entry, it's not easy. Give her a try. Again, jump on in. DFS strategy will get you one free week of premium content. Select a package that has the Fantasy Cruncher add-on and play around in the quarter tournaments. It's a good time. The other thing you can do if you're on a budget, hey, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. You can use the rewind function for free on Fantasy Cruncher, and you can say, well, I would have done this, or I would have been heavy on this player, and you can set up those settings and then see how you would have placed in prior contests that ran, the day before, the week before, etc. That's something that's very valuable, because a lot of times we'll look at stuff here and we'll say, oh, if I would have done that, I would have won. Oftentimes, if you go do that, you will see, based on the rest of your thoughts and projections, you wouldn't have won. You might have done a little better, but you wouldn't have won. So it's the tail of the tape, the telltale arrow, if you will. It's eye-opening, Adam. It's eye-opening. All right, back to this game. I think that sort of encompasses Philly. Jimmy Butler playing mucks a lot of things up. they're priced for him not playing, coming off of their really good games. You can still look to the key guys in tournaments in Embiid and Simmons, but I suspect they'll be more in the 10 to 15% max in the popularity. On the other side, Indiana, Oladipo coming back kind of pushes a few minutes away from some of the guys that we got very used to seeing getting minutes, very used to seeing shots. Sabonis at 6,500 on DraftKings feels relatively fair, but he is the only one I'm really considering for this one, Adam. I like Bojan Bogdanovic, but 5,200 now with Oladipo back, not really a play I'm looking for. Thaddeus Young, priced up. I missed while I was out in Washington State the Thaddeus Young game where he had, if I remember correctly, like 5 steals or something, and popped off for 55 fantasy points. I think that was the last game or 2 games ago. But I laughed and I said, "Boy, there it was. Now I don't have to worry about that rearing its head for the next month." But what do you like here?
99% of the field missed that.
Pardon?
I said 99% of the field missed that. I accidentally had him. I had put a new formula into into Excel that day, and it went a little nuts, and my lineups ended up being like off the wall. But I had that Young lineup, and he was like 1% owned. So the rest of the lineup wasn't that good, but
unfortunately, because it only takes one, and if you have all the right one guys in there, go right up the leaderboard. Anything here from the Pacers that you would be interested in on a 9-game slate? We have 18 teams in the player pool.
So I do want to kind of walk back what I said about Victor Oladipo. I think that if he's going to be low owned in tournaments, then he's appealing. And obviously, pay attention to reports coming out of Indiana about his minutes. But at only 8,400 on DraftKings and 8,600 on FanDuel, he played like a little over 29 minutes last game. Even if I project him for 34 minutes here, which is lower than I would project him for, if there were no concerns about his minutes. Even if I project him for like 34 minutes, he actually comes in as a pretty good option, projecting for like 44.5 fantasy points. So if he's going to be low owned, and if we don't get word that he's still limited to like 30 minutes or anything, I think he's actually a pretty interesting tournament option. But beyond that, I don't have anything from Indiana because, like you said, they're all priced for Oladipo being out. It's entirely possible that you see someone have a big game like we saw Thad Young have. Certainly Sabonis is still capable of producing in his 24 or 25 minutes. But it's just on a 9-game slate, the only guy on this team that I think is actually priced to where they succeed a high percentage of the time is probably Oladipo if he's allowed to play, in that 34-minute range.
All right, let's continue on to our next game here, near and dear to our hearts. It is Washington at Brooklyn. Who knew playoff implications in this game, Adam? Somehow the Wizards, this is how bad the East is. Somehow the Wizards, who are 5-5 in their last 10 and on a 3-game losing streak, are only 2 games out of the 8th seed. Hey, Brooklyn, 3-7 in their last 10. They're 2.5 out of the 8th seed. All kidding aside, these guys are playing for the 3rd time this year. They last played at the beginning of December, and it was a crapper of a game. It was a 102-88 ass whooping by the Wizards. Now, thing to keep in mind on that, if I'm remembering correctly, that was Brooklyn was coming in off that double, I believe it was a double overtime game from the night before. So that is going to impact things because we like to say, oh, well, that game wasn't that long ago. Probably still kind of similar players. We can utilize that as our benchmark. Not so much. Venue has changed. This one is in Brooklyn, and then Brooklyn did not play. Oh, wait, did they play yesterday? Yes, they did. So they're on a back-to-back. No, they did not. So they're not on a back-to-back. Adam, let's approach this one with fresh eyes. Let's start with a random player. Spencer Dinwiddie just got paid. He got a 3-year contract here, about a $50 million deal, if I remember correctly. They announced it after he came off a 39 NBA point game. He is averaging in the upper teens this season. Looks like he's taking the next step, and he is genuinely happy to be in Brooklyn. He was very excited. Went out on social media and thanked everybody, and I'm sure Boombada, his wallet getting fada. There you go, Adam. Big bucks. 6,500 on DraftKings. I think that is perfectly priced for a matchup with the Wizards, who play fast and loose and are in constant DGAF mode here. What do you want to do with Dinwiddie?
I think it's just like perfectly correct. It's not a play. It's not a spot where I think that he's too cheap, and it's not a spot where I think he's too expensive. I expect him to play around 30 minutes here in a really, really good matchup. But just even looking at this Brooklyn backcourt, I think that there's more point per dollar upside in D'Angelo Russell than there is in Dinwiddie. Russell $800 more expensive on DraftKings. He's a shooting guard on FanDuel, which is nice. Just a great matchup. Russell's minutes have been all over the place. It does depend on how he's playing, but that's something that I'm perfectly fine with in tournaments, because if my guy's playing poorly, he's not helping me win anyway. If he's playing well, knowing that he can get more minutes is always nice. So I think that if he plays well, you can get him in that 32 to 34 minute range in a really, really appealing matchup against the fast-paced Washington team that sucks defensively. Russell's a guy at a pretty cheap price tag that can go out there and give you 50 fantasy points. So he's my favorite guy from Brooklyn. Then you also can look at Jared Allen at only 5,600 on DraftKings. Should play around 30 minutes here against one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA. The opportunity cost at center obviously is huge, as it is on basically every slate. But I think that it's a really appealing matchup for him as well.
All right, Allen. Yeah, Allen was the other guy I was going to talk about. If you're doing anything on draft in the 8-mans, you can wait on center today, and you will end up with Steven Adams or Ayton, or probably not Ayton, I'm sorry, Allen, down there with your last pick. I did a few last night, so just throwing that out there. For those of you that like that format, look to forwards today. Runs a little thin after the top couple come off the board. Let's see. Allen, not so great in the last game, but in the first game, these two teams played 16 and 12. That's kind of where I have him tonight. I'm feeling very strongly about a double-double for him. And at 5,600, I do like that potential. I feel 30-ish fantasy points with potential gust up to flirting with the 40 fantasy point plateau on DraftKings with that double-double bonus. As long as he gets a block or two, it will help move him along. Same thing over there on FanDuel, where blocks are worth 3 per event. That's going to do it there for Brooklyn. On the Washington side here, go ahead.
Just more of a FanDuel specific play than anything, but Joe Harris is a $4,500 small forward over there. You probably get 30 to 32 minutes from him against a Washington team that gives up a ton of wide open threes. So I think that like on DraftKings where it's positionless, you can probably find a higher upside option than Joe Harris. But on FanDuel, where you have to roster 2 of these guys and there's not really much around him that's appealing, I think Joe Harris at 4,500 is a perfectly fine play.
Okay, and just to clarify, I've started using it. I know probably because I've been doing a lot of shows with you, but it's very apropos for DraftKings when we say positionless, because so many of the players have multi-position eligibility. So you get these guys that are guard, that are shooting guard, small forward, power forward. They qualify for 2 forward spots plus either guard or forward plus utility. So all of a sudden you get these guys eligible at half the different roster slots. That's what we mean by positionless basketball. It's not as restricting as it was once upon a time, or even when you look to baseball, where depending on the year, sometimes DraftKings does multiple position eligibility, seemingly with impunity. Other years they don't. In general, their rule is someone where you can see it for baseball is someone has to play 15% of the time at the secondary position before they'll give them multi-position eligibility. Well, for NBA, with literal positionless basketball out on the court, it just wherever people slot in and get designated is where you get all these funky multi-positions, because half the game the teams aren't playing without a center. So how are you classifying these guys? Right. So that's where they end up with it. Yeah. That's why you see people dip in and out of it if they're really close on something. So like Luka Doncic, God only knows why seemingly they don't want to put him at point guard, but if they're classifying a lot of their other guards as point guards, even though he's the one running the show, he will or will not get some of those other positions. So.
Yeah, the point just being that because of how flexible DraftKings rosters are, you're not really comparing position to position. Like you're comparing them across all the positions, because normally you can just slot someone in a different place and get to a completely different pool of players. Whereas on FanDuel, obviously you're still comparing across positions to figure out where to allocate money, but you have to roster 2 small forwards and you can't really get that creative about it. So that's why it's just completely different in how you kind of in the opportunity cost equation and how you view different guys.
All right. Last one. Hey, if Alan Crabb's out, that'll open up a lot of things. He's been dealing with the sore knee, but he hasn't missed time yet. So just be aware of that. Moving over to the Wizards here. Otto Porter missed his last game, only played 7 minutes in the game before that, before succumbing to a knee bruise himself. So what's your read on Porter? Is he going to be in or out tonight? Because that affects what we do with a ton of the wings here.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I'm guessing that he's out for now, but seems like he's legitimately questionable.
Yeah, and that's where this is just shaping up to be a lost season for him, but I don't think he's going to play. So if he does not play, let's start off with John Wall, who's been dealing with heel issues or bone spurs or some silly thing now with his feet. Normally we're scared to death about what's going on with his knees. And he had an illness. Now we find out his feet are hurting him. Sat a game, played like ass for a game, and then, oh, hi, I'm John Wall, so I'm going to drop 65 fantasy points against Boston because you know what? I probably wore camo underwear, just to intimidate them. What are we doing with John Wall, Adam? Has he now moved into the Trae Young, Victor Oladipo, I'm only looking at him in tournaments status?
Well, DraftKings made it really easy because they took him from 8,400 last game up to 9,500 tonight. FanDuel has him at 9,400 too. So both sites made it pretty easy. Not the 9,400 on FanDuel obviously is more appealing than 9,500 on DraftKings. But when you factor in that he's the same price as Stephen Curry, he's $100 less than Kemba, he's $700 more expensive than Kyrie, it's still a really unappealing price tag to where I think I can pretty confidently say I'm not going to get a lot of John Wall, and I'm going to be perfectly fine with that because despite what he did against Boston, he's not normally that volatile of a player. His big games normally just aren't as far off of his mean as or his projection as a lot of other players are. So it always makes him a guy that I'm less likely to roster anyway. Now that he's more expensive, I'm really less likely to do so. So yeah, I'm glad the site's kind of made that easy for me.
All right, I'm getting 0 on FanDuel with the first crunch. He's checking in at 8% on the field. And then on DraftKings, I am getting him at 4%, and the field is at 3. So that feels approximately right. And I've got, with the volatility I have, I'm projecting him for 47 fantasy points here on DraftKings. So that's kind of in his more typical range of outcomes. As Adam mentioned, he's generally one of those guys that we don't see go nuts. Now, let's assume Porter's out. Let's look at the vast array of wings and small-ish centers that we have here from the Wizards. The usual Markieff Morris disclaimer: as long as he isn't being a fool, he should be out on the court a ton. We've got, Tomas Satoransky. You've got Rivers in the mix. You've got Oubre. What do you like about these guys from a DFS perspective? Because I just can't find it in my heart to like them for basketball
anymore. So, I mean, Jeff Green most likely would move into the starting lineup if Porter's out. He sees a pretty sizable usage decrease when he's playing with Wall and Beal as opposed to coming off the bench, but the extra minutes are obviously really important. I wouldn't expect him to play 40 minutes again, but 40 minutes in regulation again. But even if you get around 30 from him, I think it's still a perfectly fine spot. It's worth keeping in mind. Like, he's played 145 minutes this season alongside Wall and Beal without Howard or Porter on the floor. He has a 12.9% usage rate. So it's a pretty sizable hit in terms of his per minute production when he's playing with these guys. So keep that in mind, especially because he is coming off of a big game. So you'll probably see more ownership filter to him. Kelly Oubre coming off the bench, I think is really interesting. Should play around 30 to 32 minutes here, and he will be playing less minutes, obviously, with Wall on the floor, which does mean an increase in usage for him. He's been playing well lately. He's been more aggressive. So I like Kelly Oubre, especially if we're going to get him at lower ownership than Jeff Green, in the same price range. And then Markieff Morris, I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone who watches these shows regularly, but his price tag keeps dropping, and it makes me still like him. He's been in foul trouble basically every game for the last, I think, like 2 weeks. But you can tell just by looking at Washington's rotations that the idea is for Keefe to play, like 32 to 34 minutes all at center. Backing up Thomas Bryant. So that makes him really, really appealing is the price tag dropping. This season, without, with Wall and Beal on and Porter and Howard off, you have Keefe with an 18.9% usage rate. But if you account for a lot of those minutes being played without Wall on the floor, you get him up to 20 to 21%. He ends up being close to a fantasy point per minute guy at, a $5,100 price tag with multi-position eligibility and normally low ownership. So I'll keep going right back to him in tournaments.
All right. Anything else from the Wizards, or can we continue on to a barn burner of a game?
Bradley Beal only played 38 minutes, including overtime last game, which would be shocking, except for he was in foul trouble. So don't take too much away from that. He picked up 2 fouls in the second quarter, but then he also picked up 2 more in the third. We've, for the most part, still been seeing him in competitive games play like every minute of the second half. So I think projecting him for around 40 to 42 minutes is still perfectly fine here, which makes him a pretty strong option at 7,900. Like, I would easily rather play Beal at 7,900 than Wall at 95.
All right, Miami, Memphis, uninspiring and a rare sub 200 over under with the 198.5 projected total. Memphis favored by 4.5 at home. We know that Dragic is going to be out. He's dealing with a knee issue. We know that Mike Conley is also dealing with a sore hamstring. They did give confirmation that he was going to play in the last game. I'm assuming they'll do the same today or rule him out. I suspect he will play. And then Hassan Whiteside is back with Miami, at least physically. Mentally, who knows where he's at. I was just checking to see what these guys have done against each other, these guys being Whiteside and Gasol. They've only played against each other twice in the last 3 years. Gasol averaging about 30 fantasy points, so nothing overly inspiring there. He, for me, is kind of a steady price play. 7,800 feels solid, feels like it probably approach 40 fantasy points, but I don't really see an eye-popping anything over 50, 55, which is probably what we want to see there. What are you looking at? Let's start with the Memphis side first. Does anybody interest you here?
Yeah, I mean, definitely more interested in the Memphis side than the Miami side, just because it's a huge pace-up spot for Memphis. You have Miami playing at a top 10 pace this season, but still not an overly appealing spot. I mean, you can look, especially with DraftKings pricing, you can look to guys like Kyle Anderson at 4,200, who I hate as a fantasy player, but should play 30 minutes and contributes in enough different categories that occasionally he runs into a good game. JaMychal Green kind of in the same boat there, where he's been very, very productive as a rebounder this year. We've seen him at times closing over Jaren Jackson just because it improves Memphis's ability to rebound, and that's something that they've been struggling with when Jackson's on the floor. So both of those guys are okay. Certainly not priorities for me, but guys that you can go to. As far as Conley and Gasol, I think they're pretty fairly priced. The addition of Joakim Noah has made Marc Gasol much less appealing than he was earlier in the season. He was being forced into 36 to 38 minutes in competitive games, but now with the addition of Noah, plus the fact that Jackson can play some backup center still, you're getting 32 minutes from Marc Gasol more often than not. So that's not really that appealing. And then Conley's price tag at 8,100 is kind of take it or leave it for me.
Yeah, this one is feeling like a Manny special, if you will. Our good friend Manny Laura said, yeah, sometimes I just forget games are on the slate. We call those a Manny special. This is shaping up to be one. Even with Dragic out, it's tough to see what's going to happen from the Miami side. Memphis kind of getting back to their grit and grind ways, if you will. Not quite the same when they had Zebo and Tony Allen and that cast of characters, but they're still playing slow, and they are challenging teams on every possession, and it's just what they do systematically, even with different coaches. So that is limiting my interest in any of the Miami guys at all. Do you have any interest? And then one thing I did want to point out is Whiteside was with the team in the last game. He was just a DNP coach's decision. So. Yeah,
the only thing that stands out to me is why the hell is Josh Richardson $5,600 on DraftKings?
I keep looking at that, and he is one of those guys that's shooting guard, small forward, so he's eligible for like every position. It feels like, let's do a little game log surfing, Adam. They've been horrible. He has not been over 30 fantasy points since November 30th. And he has been getting the minutes, and he has decided to not take shots. And that is a concern for me, because when you got a guy that depends on some of his scoring, taking 11, 10, 10, 14 shots over his last few games, when we're used to seeing him in the upper teens or approaching 20, it's not going to do it for me. But you know what you guys should do that are watching this show? You should tune in to Live Before Lock with One Fast Eddie Fear, because he is a Josh Richardson fanboy, and he generally knows what is going to be a good matchup or not, especially when you're looking deeper into those that are not on the surface. Because on the surface, this one looks like, it's a nice price point, but I'm not going to get him. So there you go. There's your plug for the night show. Anything else on this one, or shall we get into something fun?
I just wanted to point out that I'm higher on Richardson. I think the price tag's just too cheap for me. He hasn't been super productive in this spot with Dragic off and with Whiteside on this season. He's played 268 minutes. He's averaged 0.8 fantasy points per minute. But if you plug him in for 36 minutes, it still gives you, a pretty solid value at 5,600. So it's going to be tough. I hate the matchup. And if he is going to be really popular in tournaments, it would be a spot that I can look to get away from. But, I'm not sure what we have him projected at right now, but assuming people kind of just shy away from a really unattractive matchup and some really bad game logs, I think that the price tag is just too low on Richardson.
We have him at 13%. So my guess is, in the ownership projections, take into account a lot of different stuff. They update throughout the day. It takes into account price, production, what social media is saying, what other content is saying. There's a fun other stuff, can't give away all of the recipe there, but they are uncannily accurate. And I suspect this one is a function of so many people kind of using optimizers, because optimizers don't have feelings, Adam. They don't really look at game logs. They don't look at revenge. They don't look at narrative. They don't look at, a variety of things that we like to use with our human biases. So my projections, running them with 70% cap, 25% randomization, get him at 18%, a little above the field. This is one of those plays I literally wouldn't click on his name if I was hand building lineups, but I'll probably have some in some of my automated builds here.
Yeah, for context, I have his rates at where they've been without Dragic on the floor this season, and I have him projected for 34 DraftKings points if he gets 36 minutes. If he gets 34, then you're down in the 32 fantasy point range. But both of those just come in as pretty solid plays at his price.
All right, something fun. We got the 24 days of giveaways. So how you participate in those is, once the YouTube show is over, you can leave comments. The comments we want you to leave is, what is your favorite Christmas movie? Now, Adam is not an avid watcher of movies, so here's the first question. Adam, what's your favorite Christmas movie? You have to have seen it. Bad Santa. Okay, Bad Santa 1 or 2?
1. Okay.
Have you seen any other Christmas movies?
Yeah, I've seen Die Hard.
There we go. I was going to work Die Hard in. Okay, good.
Yeah, I've seen the Grinch, the Jim Carrey one.
Okay,
big fan of that. Elf's good.
Okay, so you've seen a few. Christmas Vacation, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street. Any of those?
No.
All right. Well, you're a heathen for not having seen It's a Wonderful Life. That is probably, I think, there's been a lot of good movies in the last 20 years, but I used to always say that is probably my favorite all-time movie, but it's not my favorite Christmas movie, because my favorite Christmas movie would be Die Hard.
Yeah.
And I don't care what they say it is a Christmas movie.
It is entirely possible that I've seen those movies and I just don't remember. That's also my thing, is I don't watch movies and then I don't know what I haven't seen until I'm halfway through watching one.
Right, well, these are black and white, so I'm guessing you may
not
have seen. Yeah,
nope,
you haven't seen them. So there we go. So in the comments here, put in, give us a like and put in your favorite Christmas movie. You will be eligible for the random drawing today, where we gather all the comments, put everybody in the virtual hat, pick out a name, and you can choose one of two prizes. You can have any single season Awesomeo premium subscription for 1 month, or if you're already an Awesomeo subscriber, you can go pick out some merchandise from the Awesomeo.com store. So it's actually some cool stuff. variety of hoodies, some 3/4 length sleeve jerseys. I guess, well, technically those aren't jerseys. When I played Little League, that's what we called jerseys because we didn't have like real jerseys because that was back in the Stone Age. But and yes, we did play in full wool outfits, Adam, because that was the olden days. But Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of the dads coaching my team, so it was a good time. What do you got here? So you're going to go with Die Hard as your favorite Christmas movie?
Bad Santa and then Die Hard.
Okay. I think Dark Horse Christmas Vacation, but Die Hard's still there for me. Still one of my all-time favorite movies. And Bruce Willis with hair. And in the pantheon of actors, I mean, Bruce Willis, this is my brother's take. He says Bruce Willis is probably the greatest actor of all time because he's managed to approach 50 career films and he just plays the same character with the same expression in all of them.
So that makes you stay on the second best actor of all time?
Right up there. But he's got an accent, so that elevates him into a different category. So
okay.
Bruce doesn't have all of those tools in his toolbox. Okay, let's finish out our last 3 games here. OKC and Denver. This is actually quite an intriguing one here. OKC road favorites by 1.5. We have a 217 over under on this one. We've got some injuries that are really opening some things up here for Denver. So let's start on the Denver side first. Millsap out with a broken toe. We know that Will Barton's been out for the majority of the season. Gary Harris has now joined him as being out. This has done something pretty crazy, Adam. And in most projection systems that I went out and looked at this morning, and as well as the ownership projections, we're seeing Mr. Plumlee pop to the top here. Do you feel good about Plumlee for his price on both sites in his expanded role now that there's so many minutes opening up in the front court?
I'm not sure that he starts here.
Okay. Because we have Juancho, your least favorite, and then we have Trey Lyles, your favorite. So putting these 3 in the mix, talk to me about those guys.
Yeah, so I mean, I love Plumlee if he's going to start and play 35 minutes again, but this would just be a really weird spot, I think, for Plumlee. Like, not that Memphis was the easiest, especially when Jaren Jackson's constantly in foul trouble, but I don't know, like, is Plumlee going to be out there playing against Jeremy Grant and like Paul George and those guys? Like, I don't know. It's a weird spot. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Trey Lyles goes back into the starting lineup here against a smaller Oklahoma City team. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And if you're playing FanDuel and we don't have a Denver starting lineup before lock, I think that taking a chance on Trey Lyles over Plumlee is probably a pretty good way to go, and then hope that he cracks the starting lineup and you get a lower owned Trey Lyles. But yeah, I mean, if Plumlee does start, then it's frustrating because normally that's something that it takes away permanent productivity for him and for Jokic, but you would get more minutes for Plumlee. So I think that, he would be a clear top value play. I'm just not entirely convinced he starts here unless we get news that he is.
Okay. Looking to the stalwart, the beacon, Nikola Jokic. Is this a spot where you want to tangle with Steven Adams?
I'm not opposed to it. It's not a great matchup, but I just love Jokic as a player. I do think that if Plumlee is out there, it's not good for Jokic. It just they did a good job against Memphis of actually getting out of each other's way. They are both good passers, and they can make it work. But in general, we've seen that more often than not, the Jokic plus Plumlee experiment ends up in Jokic being less productive. So that's certainly a concern if Plumlee's out there, on top of it being a tough matchup with Adams. But, still, 34 to 36 minutes from Jokic, just an incredibly talented offensive player, then there's still plenty of upside for him. It's just not a spot that I would be looking at in cash games because I think there's other ways to go.
All right, here is the breakdown. In the last 7 games that they played each other, Jokic has, this is most recent, stretching back to 2 years ago, DraftKings points 31, 58, 76, 35, 73, 38, 25. The differentiator, when he plays more than 35 minutes, he puts up those massive scores, including games with, where did we go, 41 minutes, 37 minutes, and 40 minutes. So if you want to see those big games, you're going to need those kind of minutes. And as Adam said, the new variable of Plumlee in there can be a little bit tricky. So your mileage may vary on this one, and it's one that you'll want to just keep an eye on. Just keep an eye on.
For what it's worth, until we get news, I'm projecting this as Trey Lyles starting.
Okay, which definitely makes sense.
So for one, just because I think it makes more sense matchup wise, but for two, just while you were talking, kind of quickly scrolling through some news. Apparently Malone had mentioned prior to last game the possibility of alternating starts between Lyles and Plumlee. So it doesn't sound like the Plumlee thing was anything set in stone, at least. And I don't know. I would guess put it at maybe 60-40 that Lyles starts.
Did he say anything about based on matchup, or just saying, we're going to alternate starts?
I couldn't find the actual quote, so it was just being reported by different sites that he had said he might alternate them. So I don't know if that actually meant game by game or if it meant, based on matchup, which would make more sense, obviously. But I mean, keep in mind, we've seen Malone do the matchup thing plenty, not so much this season, but in previous seasons, with Plumlee and with his front court in general. So I just think it's more likely that Lyles gets to start.
All right. The backcourt for Denver is somewhat intriguing. We have Jamal Murray, who now has unfettered access to do pretty much whatever he wants without Barton and Harris there. He's been a little bit dinged up himself. I believe he had a bruised something. One of his legs was sore, but they fully expect him to play. He is a guy that I really like. If you're over there on Draft, a little quick tip: grab Paul George with pick 1 in those 8-mans. Grab Murray. You can usually get him on pick 3, and then if you want to wait till the end, you can get Steven Adams. Now, Adams has not done overly well in his last 8 games here against Jokic. He's only topped 30 fantasy points. Those both happen to be in the last 2, but that's about where I think he'll check in tonight. If you're getting that with your last pick over there in the 8-mans, you're doing just fine. Looking for real DFS with salary caps. Not really a fan of Adams, but Murray, yes. Monte Morris, maybe? Question mark. I'm going to toss that one to you for the Denver backcourt, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, Morris's minutes really haven't been as good as I expected them to be. He did get to 28 against Memphis. Torrey Craig played 24.5 in that game. And that's really been the thing, is that Craig is stealing minutes there. And this is a spot where I expect Craig to play more, because his really sole purpose for being out there is defensively. I fully expect him to be used on Paul George quite a bit, or Russell Westbrook, one of the two. But two, ball dominant guys that are very, very good offensive players gives Torrey Craig a ton of reason to be on the floor. It means that Malik Beasley and Monte Morris are more difficult to trust from a minute standpoint, especially for as long as Hernan Gomez is, running out there for 36 minutes a night. So I'm not looking to get to either of Morris or Beasley here, just because I think that Craig plays towards the top of his minutes range.
All right. And then, I gotta change my. Do you think Swaggy P? I see them talking about him in chat. As soon as Denver picked him up, I sent a message to Adam saying, "Oh joy, Swaggy P is back in our lives." But I'm just looking to see. He has not debuted yet for Denver. Do you think that is imminent at all?
I do not expect him to play tonight.
All right. That'll kind of do it here for Denver. Looking at the Thunder, I do really like Paul George. I think that Russell Westbrook is okay. He's coming off 2 games where he didn't top 50 fantasy points, but one of them actually was a triple-double. Still played 36 minutes against Utah. Had only 45 fantasy points, and then he had a 26-7 with 4 steals and 2 blocks against New Orleans in a close one, an actual loss there on the road in New Orleans for 47 fantasy points. So not horrible, but not quite what we're expecting from Russell Westbrook. He is amongst the higher price players tonight at 10,800. Will he be in your plans? Paul George, 9,100. That's his up near his upper level there, but upper stratosphere of his prices. I want to get somebody on both sides of these games. This is one I'll probably set up a little group for Adam and just say, play play one of each, or you can do that on the base settings over there on Fantasy Cruncher and say must play one from each team. Sometimes I like to run 10 teams with something specific like that with various game scripts. But what do you want to look to here for the Thunder?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of these two guys, at least one of these two guys, just has a monster game here. Just thinking about how this team is set up defensively without Millsap. They take a hit there having Trey Lyles or Mason Plumlee at the 4, and you have Torrey Craig, who's actually done a very good job this season defending guys, but obviously he can only defend one of the two. He could defend Westbrook. Put Murray on someone else, and then you end up with Hernan Gomez or Lyles on George, in which case I would love Paul George. If you have Torrey Craig on George, then Westbrook should go nuts. So one of these two guys, I think, probably has a really big game. I would lean toward George on DraftKings just because he's cheaper. 9,600 on FanDuel for him. I'd rather get to Westbrook, but still no issue getting to George. It's worth pointing out that since Westbrook came back from his injury, they've played 11 games. Paul George is averaging 1.35 DraftKings points per minute. So he really hasn't taken a big hit in terms of fantasy production. He's still got a 27.5% usage rate. He's still got an 18.5% assist percentage. So we've seen him be more productive than I expected him to be with Westbrook back. And this is a spot where I just think that he could run into a really big game. So I like both of these guys, but I like George a little bit more.
All right. Anything else from this game, or shall we continue on, wrap this bad boy up here?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like Dennis Schroeder, if you get some in your lineup, that's fine. He probably plays around 30 minutes, but just much less productive minutes for him than for guys like George and Westbrook, obviously.
All right, last two games of the night. This one's going to be a fun one. Golden State at Sacramento checks in with the 235.5 over-under. This is the highest projected point total of this slate. Golden State favored by 7.5. The one thing I really want to point out is that the Kings apparently are not scared of Golden State. They have won two of their last 3 in Golden State, including a month ago. That was the loss. They lost by 1 point, 117-116. So they generally play these guys tight. We do have a great over-under here. This is something we're going to actually start with the Golden State side. I am looking to get one of these Warriors on most of my teams, I think, Adam, be it Curry, be it Durant, or the other guy who we've seen had great success against Sacramento, including the NBA record for points in a quarter, is Klay Thompson. So I think these guys are kind of fun, and I am a sort of now a co-favorite team is the Sacramento Kings. I want to look to get somebody from the Kings as well in a lot of my lineups. So that's one of these fun ones where you can create a group and rules within Fantasy Cruncher. So I will probably be doing that. This is something that I like to muck around with, but this feels like a good synergy game. It's the late night hammer. Granted, there will be 3 going on at the same time, but if you pick 2 guys that are closing on the closing units, you can have some real fun if this stays tight down the stretch. Start off with the Warriors. Is anybody popping up in your crunches yet?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a spot where, and I talked about it earlier this season, and then it wasn't really that much of an issue with Curry out. But if you take the median rates that these guys get, like the average, like if you take the average, usage rate and assist percentage and everything for guys like Durant and Curry and Thompson, or since Curry came back, nobody really pops out because you're getting median rates when normally, because of the way Golden State plays, there's spiked games for different guys. So for tournaments, I want to make sure in this spot in particular, because it is such an appealing matchup against Sacramento, I want to make sure that I'm inputting rates for Durant and Curry and Thompson that reflect to some extent the possibility that they're the hot hand and that they're the ones out there chucking up shots on 34% of their possessions or whatever. So median projections, they're not popping quite as much as I expected them to, but when I adjust for basically upside in terms of usage rate, then it makes me like all these guys quite a bit.
All right, and this is one where you can set up multiple rules. You can say, play me somebody from this group, but then nobody more than one. And if you're playing somebody from this group, then play somebody from this other group. as well. So these are the fun things that you can do. There are a variety of ways that you can set that up in Cruncher. It gets a little more complex, but for those of you behind the paywall in Slack, we can always talk about the best ways to do that. Or, hey, send an email to support@cruncher.com. They'll hook you up. But
$6,200 Klay Thompson on DraftKings is egregious. I just noticed that price point.
So 0 in my FanDuel crunch. I'm getting 55% Curry, 53% Durant, and I don't have any rules set up for this one, and then 15% Draymond, and then only 2% Hield. That's it. So nobody's really coming up on the Kings. On DraftKings, we get 34%, which is really high for Klay Thompson, but I really, really like this spot, and I am someone that rarely plays Klay Thompson for a variety of reasons. Now, he's checking in at 18% on the field. If that holds true with the field, I think I'm okay coming in a little bit more. 20 to 25% feels about right for me. But again, I'm going to want one of these Golden State guys on the majority of my team for their big three. The other guys coming up from this game on the DraftKings Crunch are Hield at 13. We've got him at 16. Curry at 12. We've got him at 8. Willie Cauley-Stein at 5. We got him at 6. De'Aaron Fox at 4. We got him at 13. So drops off dramatically. Those percentages will probably change on the margin as we get additional news and bring guys in and out. But Thompson, Adam, this is looking like a great spot for him on DraftKings. But as you said, if he's having a good game, or if the other two are having a good game, not all three of these guys are going to have good games together. Two of the three can.
Yeah, but it's Thompson's price tag is just so cheap that it's really, really tough for him to fail, assuming he gets, around 36 minutes in a competitive game here. He does still have a 27.5% usage rate since Curry came back. So he's still getting his shots. He's scoring dependent as always, but it's a, up-tempo game. Sacramento is one of the fastest teams in the league. Golden State plays faster when Curry's out there, and now you have Draymond back to help with that as well. It's just the price tag just jumps out. You have Durant and Curry both at over $10,000 on DraftKings, which makes it so they really have to be the hot hand and the one that is making all their threes. But Thompson just he has to for you to be fine with his score, you need a point per minute from Thompson, and that's pretty easy to get even without factoring in that he can just go nuts in this spot.
Yeah, looking at his since Curry has returned, I'm just going to start from Curry's first game back, and these are real NBA points: 21, 27, 16, 20, 26, 14. Those are surprisingly higher than I thought, that with that many over 20, and especially that, over 25. I would have expected to see more in the 18, 19, 16 range. So that feels kind of good. He's still chipping in with a couple assists per game, and he's actually been getting about a steal and a half per game in that stretch. Or stock per game, steals plus blocks. So that's also kind of nice as well, because that will goose things. And then, hey, if he's dropping in the threes, you get another half-point bonus for those on DraftKings. And he, shockingly, Adam, 0 for 5 against Toronto, but his makes were 4, 4, 2, 3, 1, 3 in the games Curry was back in. So that's great to see. So load him up. I rarely say this. Klay Thompson, Washington State University's own. Going to be playing him. Talk about the rest of Golden State. You've kind of hit on it. I don't want more than one of these guys on my lineups, but I can see it with the price on Thompson here. Any DraftKings love for Curry or Durant, or we are forced to play two of each of their positions?
Yeah, they're fine. I would rather play $10,200 Curry than $9,500 John Wall, but I think they're still priced pretty correctly. They either one of them can easily go out there and give you 60 fantasy points, but it's just not that likely of an event. It's more likely that they go out and score 50, 52, and you just have them priced so closely to Joel Embiid that it's going to be really tough to get them unless you're intentionally looking to get pieces from this game. Whereas Thompson just stands out as a clear top play. I think the 9,400 for Curry on FanDuel is very, very nice. I love that price tag for him. I would have a lot of Steph Curry on FanDuel.
All right, looking at the Kings, particularly on DraftKings, no pun intended there, not really thrilled by any particular guy. We've got Bogey Bogdanovic there. I love watching their games when they call him Bogey. It makes me laugh. But he's in the mix. Buddy Hield's in the mix. Willie Cauley-Stein, not the best history against Golden State. He will probably be dealing with Draymond. Not really thrilled about that. You've got Marvin Bagley Jr. You've got De'Aaron Fox. These guys all feel like they're just like appropriately priced within $100 either way, which is just like, wow, DraftKings algorithm, you're not going to give me any little nooks and crannies to get in there and find some value. Do you want anybody from the Kings, or will this be something where you have to set up a rule to pull in somebody from the Kings if you're playing some Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, I think with how Sacramento is priced, where I get them, I'm going to want it to be, at least like a mini game stack, just because in terms of, optimal plays or whatever, they're appropriately priced, especially now that the Kings are fully healthy. And what is probably one of the dumbest statements I've ever had to say on a fantasy sports show, Kosta Koufos is playing 12 minutes a night, and it actually affects things because you essentially Bagley's getting his 26 to 30 minutes, but he's getting less of them at center because Kosta Koufos has to play, but it's also affecting Cauley-Stein, who now is playing like 30 minutes instead of 34, even when he's not in foul trouble. Bogdanovich being healthy, playing 30 to 32 minutes, it's knocking Hield back to 30 to 32 minutes most nights. Bjelica ran into almost 29 minutes against Minnesota. I don't expect that to necessarily continue, but he's certainly capable of it. It's just a lot of healthy, similar players now for Sacramento, and it makes it so that it's kind of tough to get them as their minutes are dropping a little bit because everyone's healthy at the same time that their price tags are rising as a result of how well they've been playing. So it's obviously a really, really appealing game, and it's the type of game where if you game stack it, you could certainly just run away with tournaments because it has the potential to just be the highest scoring game on the night by a wide margin. But in terms of just standalone plays, I think these guys are all pretty correctly priced.
All right, let's hit our last game of the night, the third of the three nightcaps. It's Toronto at Portland. Some injury news and notes. Jonas Valanciunas will miss the foreseeable future with his injury, so that is going to make Serge Ibaka very intriguing. On the other side with Portland, what are we going to do with Jusuf Nurkic? Does he match up with the somewhat now depleted of big lumbering dudes in their front court? I know you're the Nurkic whisperer. What are you looking at here, Nurkic and Ibaka? Because both are going to be affected with Joe Val being out.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Kawhi Leonard affects Ibaka quite a bit as well. Last I saw, Kawhi still questionable. Has that changed?
No, that has not. Which, who started the last game? That would be Fred VanVleet. Dropping it in the chat. We're going there now, Adam. I was going to talk about the front court first, then get us the back court. But there you go. Drop that in the chat. I have to play Fred VanVleet no matter what. You guys don't have to. Top 5 win. We're upping it to 25 players, so it doesn't need to fill to run. On DraftKings, it's just $1. Come on. Plus, you can see Seth or Clairvoyant win because they always win. Adam, front court. Let's assume that Kawhi is out and break it down from there.
So, yeah, I mean, if Kawhi's out, it obviously just changes this entire game. But you have Serge Ibaka, who's locked into a bunch of minutes now without Valanciunas. Not that he wasn't playing minutes most nights anyway, but he sees a huge bump without Kawhi on the floor this season. His usage goes from about 22.5% up to like 28%. He averages he's averaging 1.35 DraftKings points per minute without Kawhi on the floor this season. It's not a bad matchup here. Should be able to pull Nurkic away from the basket and have some success. So I really like Serge if Kawhi sits. Even if he's in, I think he's a perfectly fine option at 6,300. There's nothing wrong with that. Kyle Lowry is another one that if Kawhi is out, you just get a monster boost in terms of production and usage rate. He goes up to 24% when Kawhi's not on the floor. He's at 17.5% when he plays alongside Kawhi. Averages 1.34 DraftKings points per minute without Leonard. Averages about 0.9 with Leonard. So makes all the difference in the world. His price tag has come up to account for Leonard's absence, more so than Ibaka's has. So I'd rather take a chance on Ibaka than take a chance on Lowry if I have to choose between the two. But obviously on DraftKings, it's just a spot where you're going to want to make sure that you're around your computer to late swap. Both of those guys, Ibaka, I think, is a good play regardless. Lowry, very dependent at his price on Kawhi. Pascal Siakam is fine. I don't feel very strongly one way or the other about him. I prefer Ibaka, But if ownership dictates, I think it's a perfectly fine pivot. Beyond that, not really anything on Toronto that I love. Van Vliet's okay as a value play, but there's plenty of value on this slate.
Greg Monroe, does he move into the realm of potentially playing 15 minutes?
Yeah, I would expect him to play around 14 minutes.
Okay, so not quite enough to really move the needle on him as a value play either. Looking over there on Portland, we've got Dame Lillard. Has not, if you're doing a little game log watching, not been exciting lately, but he has that 55 fantasy point game in his bag at any given time. He's one of the best second half players and fourth quarter scorers in the game, so that's something that can really happen. This one could be pace up with Joe Val completely out of the picture here, so that's something. If he gets in my lineups, I'm okay with it. I'd still rather have somebody from the Golden State or Sacramento game, but that's what a lot of people are going to be thinking as well. Nurkic, 6,700. Wish we could play three centers. What are you doing with Nurkic?
I mean, the price tag's just insane. And the concern, I guess, would be that, Serge Ibaka is a stretch five and Nurkic could lose minutes there. But we really haven't seen that be the case this season like we have in the past. And I was just kind of like quickly scrolling through some Nurkic game logs to try and, find similar spots. He played 31 minutes against the Spurs, where they have LaMarcus Aldridge. He's played about 30 minutes against, guys like Gasol and Towns, not stretch fives, but guys that are at least can pull him away from the basket a little bit and make him defend around the perimeter. So the minutes really just have not been based on matchup for Nurkic this season. It's been based on, he loses minutes in blowouts, obviously. He loses minutes when he's in foul trouble, but we really just haven't seen him getting run off the court by shooters. So it makes me feel better about, projecting him in that 30 to 32 minute range here. And I just don't know how he's ever $6,700. The guy averages 1.3 fantasy points per minute for the season. And if you give him 30 minutes, he just comes in as like a phenomenal play at that price. So easily my favorite play on Portland. I do think that, $8,500 Dame Lillard is too cheap as well. He's cheaper than Kyrie, he's cheaper than Wall, he's cheaper than Kemba. He's got a tough matchup against Toronto, but it's a game that should be competitive. And we know just the kind of ceiling that Lillard has. So I like Lillard a lot also. I would have him right behind Nurkic.
All right, Adam, remember we're sponsored by Thrive, so if you could pull that up, let's pick a couple of those and throw them out there. You can, let me drop the Thrive link in the chat here. You can get a nice little deposit bonus from them if you come in on this link. Now, Thrive is a game that is embracing what are their player props. So the fun thing about this is there's more strategy in it. So there's 20 questions. You pick 10 to create your quote lineup, and then with each 10, you pick what the likely outcome is. Sorry, I'm choking up here. This is so emotional. They have sort of like the VIG, if you will, the likelihood of outcome. So if something is going to be more likely to happen, or they feel that it is, you'll get less points. If something might be the less likely outcome, you'll get more points. All those points are added up for your correct selections. That becomes your score. So it is one of those fun games out there. A lot of strategy in it. And game theory, because you can sit there and say, oh, I think a lot of people are going to do this, and you can either directly go against it, or you can pick something else entirely for various layers and levels of hedging. But let me drop this little link here in the chat. Let's do a couple questions here, Adam. What do we got there?
All right, so let's start with Kemba in his matchup against the Knicks. We have 23.5 points for Kemba, 95 points for the over, 105 points for the under.
They want us to take the over. I'm going to take the under on this one, Adam, because I think that this game gets out of hand and Kemba gets a break.
Yeah, I'm taking the over because even if I project him for 34 minutes, I have him projected for 28.9 real points, which obviously isn't even close. Like, for me to get under on 23.5 points for Kemba, I would have to have him play about 27 minutes.
Okay. Fair enough.
So I got the over on Kemba. All right, next one. Let's go with 18.5 total rebounds plus assists for Giannis Antetokounmpo. 1.5 points for the 105 points for the over, 95 points for the under. 18.5 rebounds plus assists.
I'm going to take the under, just barely. Again, I feel like this one could be getting a little more out of hand. We haven't seen his minutes where they are, and he was he missed 2 games ago. So I'm going to go under. I like the number, but I'm still going to go under.
Yeah, I think it's really close. If I project Giannis for 36 minutes, I get about 19 rebounds plus assists. But I'm going to go ahead and take the under as well, just because I'm not super confident in him getting to 36 minutes for a variety of reasons. It is a pace down game. So
feels more like a really 32-minute game is kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, even if I put him at 34, I get to like 16 total. So I think it's a really, really good over-under, but I'll go ahead and take the under here.
All right, let's do one more here.
All right, let's go to John Wall, since we kind of wrote him off on DFS sites at his price.
No price here, though. Reminder, no price.
Right. Yeah. So 34.5 total points plus rebounds plus assists for John Wall. 110 points for the over, 90 for the under.
I'm going to take the over. Now, the one thing that everybody needs to remember as you're balancing between these different sites, it's points plus assists plus rebounds. It's not 1.2 for an assist, 1.5 for a rebound, etc. There's no double points. This is just the raw event. So don't lose sight of that, because if it was just fantasy points on DraftKings scoring, yeah. I mean, I'm totally in on this one. But it's the raw actual stats. So I'm still going to take the over. But I think that's reasonably appropriate as well.
You said you have the over?
Yes.
Yeah, I have him at 36.8. So with the over getting 110 points, I'm going there too.
All right. With that, we're going to finish on up here. A reminder, when this show goes off the air, you can go into the comment section. Tell us your favorite Christmas movie. Adam and I are leaning towards Die Hard and Elf for Adam. Or probably not Elf. Bad Santa. And then for me...
Also Elf.
Oh, you like Elf as well? Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And then I It's a Wonderful Life is pretty good with Christmas Vacation. So in about 20 minutes, you're going to get another show here. It will be featuring Ben Rasa, also known as Jazz Raz, talking about some wagering for college football this weekend. We have the bowl game starting, and then we're going to pick out a couple of NFL games and give our takes on those. And we want some participation in there, so that will be fun as well. So we're going to get on out of here with that. Good luck, gamers.